these are my 5 drawings for 5 minutes. No, what is it? Those are my 5 drawings. Hi, my name is Jung Key. I'm an artist designer based in Brooklyn, and these are my 5 drawings in 5 minutes for Well Fed. If I had to give up bread or cheese, I would choose cheese. I don't even like cheese. I don't eat dairy. So that one's pretty easy. What is my sign? I'm a Sagittarius. This is supposed to be like a bow and arrow, I guess. Sagittarius are funny, warm, compassionate, loud, adventurous, can never be in one place. They love to travel, which are all true. It's all true. Cat or dog? Cat. We're actually getting a kitten, so I'll actually be a cat owner very soon. The names we're thinking about for our cat will be Bisa, which is kitty in Arabic, which is like, you know, cute, I guess. But I love dogs too. But I can't have a dog in New York unless I have a backyard. If I could eat one thing every day for the rest of my life, what would it be? I'm not the food person. Burgers and fries. It can be from McDonald's, it could be from Burger King. The trashier, the better. Spotify or Apple Music? Spotify! Yeah, their logo's like a globe. Oh, I listen to so much music. I'm loving Baby Rose. She has a song called Sold Out, and I think the other song is like Morals, which is good, or Orbit by Now Is Always So Good. Yeah, cool. You're right by the airport. It's like, yeah, it's like right over there, but it really takes me less than 30 minutes to get to the airport. Awesome. Yeah. So that's it. I'm Jung Key, and those are my 5 drawings in 5 minutes. You can listen to the rest of my podcast at wellfedpodcast.com.
I nailed it.
With my crappy drawings.
No.